Hi. My name's Jacob. I'm about to talk about my newest project, but first I figured I would give a little background. So I've been dabbling with game development for the better part of my life. When I was around 11, I started messing around with Game Maker, I want to say version 8, don't quote me on that. Made a whole ton of unfinished projects until 2020. I finally finished a game and released it. It was called Smash Bob. I think it was pretty decent. And then later that year, I also made a game jam game called Essential Worker Zombie Pandemic that was really shoddily made, but it had a funny concept, so I'm not ashamed of talking about it. Then after that, I got into doing animations in Blender and did a bunch of liminal space horror stuff. And now I'm pivoting back once again to my original love of video games. So, this next project of mine I wanted to share with the world via devlogs. I've been watching devlogs for years, and I thought it would be really cool. Be warned, there will be spoilers throughout this series for the game that will be very story-driven. So, I mean, if that's a problem, you've been warned, but, I mean, as of right now, it doesn't even have a name, so probably not really worth giving a warning. But regardless, I hope you enjoy the video. Unlike most of the games I've worked on throughout my life, this game started with the idea for the story rather than the gameplay or even the genre. I envisioned a story about a soldier who thinks he is fighting for justice and against tyranny, only to learn the horrible truth and join with a ragtag team of partisans to fight against his former nation. I had some emotional beats in mind, as well as the basic plot, but really had no idea what kind of gameplay this needed to be expressed through. I toyed with a few ideas, from a Silent Hill-esque nightmare redemption survival horror experience, to even a Doom clone, somehow. Not entirely sure how that would work. The bulk of my ideas leaned into strategy games, which happened to be a personal favorite genre of mine, and XCOM quickly came to mind. Specifically XCOM 2, a game I love but am also really ass at. I really like the idea of maneuvering around the battlefield and flanking the enemy. James and I fleshed this out over the course of a walk on a rather chilly December day. We blocked out some weapon types, abilities, characters, and a bunch of other miscellaneous ideas. We started a GDD, or Game Design Doc, to keep all of our design work. James plotted out the story, and I outlined the gameplay systems and started to look into how to make it tick under the hood. So going into this, I knew it was going to be a tad bit tricky. I have experience with a couple of genres, but never with a turn-based strategy game. I think I once dabbled with using MP grids, but setting up grids and arrays and stuff in GameMaker was always something I kinda struggled with. For a while, I messed around with it to very little results. I was just having trouble wrapping my head around what exactly it was I was trying to do. Then I ended up taking some magical, legal, fruit chews, and it just made sense. It was incredibly bizarre, but I actually managed to get the bulk of the pathfinding and movement system done in that one sitting. Hell, I even wrote this video under the influence of some of that good shit, so, yeah, I guess that's just part of the process now. As the game stands now, it has a player movement system driven by clicking on the desired grid square, a camera that follows the object of focus around real smoothly, currently the player, and a line that gives you a preview of the path that would be taken if you were to click on a square. The last one in particular still needs some work, but hey, it kind of works, so moving on.
Have you seen this movie? It's fucking great. Also, you need to say more than that.
Yeah, you're right. By the way, I sort of talked about you in the script already, but forgot to introduce you, so may say a few words about yourself.
Read Brandon Sanderson! Read Brandon Sanderson! Read Brandon Sanderson! Anyway, hi, my name's James.
The first thing I did was set up the grid itself. I mostly used a tutorial for this, so there really isn't much to comment on there. Same is said for pathfinding and player movement, although GameMaker makes both of these like one line, so I probably would have figured that one out eventually. I did also add in a little square cursor that shows which tile you're currently hovering the mouse over, which makes it a lot easier to tell what you're about to click on. It also shows you if that space can be clicked on, and if it's a solid, impassable space, it turns red instead of white, which I thought was really cool. The camera was up next. Thankfully, I have made this exact camera a billion times before, so it was mostly pretty easy. I started with implementing a system where you can pan the camera regardless of the target it is meant to be following. This is a battlefield strategy game, so the ability to survey the field is essential to making that whole concept work. Currently, it only works with the arrow keys, but I have plans to make mouse panning possible. I will have to make a whole system as well for snapping the camera to objects of importance, but also make it so the player can uncouple the camera from the focal point with enough resistance. I also gave the camera a very smooth acceleration and deceleration effect. I find that games without a smooth camera make me unironically physically ill. I set it to follow the player by default, and will have to probably make a state machine to allow it to switch functions cleanly. Lastly, I clamped it so you can't see outside of the gameplay area. This, however, also is really glitchy and doesn't work with the zooming function I put in. I also forgot to write about in the script that I wrote here. But whatever, I'm sure I'll fix it eventually. The next part ended up being a little weirder. My task was to draw a line from the player to their destination, showing the path that they will be taking, which GameMaker actually has a function for already. So I plopped that bad boy in the draw event and let her rip. The result was this. Hey, editing Jacob here. I tried to undo the fix so I could show the glitch, but it didn't actually make it happen again. It's now broken in a different way. Here's a beautiful visual demonstration of what it may have looked like. I spent way too much time trying to figure out why this was happening. I somehow managed to fix it by moving the code that draws the line into the camera object's draw event. For some reason, running the same code in here just makes it work. I am not entirely sure why. If this is the long-term solution, I will have to make the camera detect who is moving and draw the line for them. I would prefer to draw it locally, but I don't want to spend too much time on it. The way I see it, it basically already works as is. It's just kind of weird, and I don't really want to spend a ton of time trying to make the exact same thing happen, but with different code under the hood, unless it somehow became a pain in the ass to deal with. And that leaves us to where we are now. My immediate plan is to clean up the code I have now, make it a bit more modular for easier expansion in the future, and then start on the next round of features, like making it actually turn-based and stuff. You know, little things. One idea that was floated that I'm really excited about and very enthusiastic about is taking inspiration from the art of 20th century propaganda, mostly World War I and World War II, but also using that as kind of a framing device, and also framing it as the main character that you play as is reading a book, presumably to his kids and or grandkids, because I'd like him to be kind of an older man, and the gameplay experience itself is framed like a book and uses kind of old-time book art as the art style influence. You know, very bold lines, kind of muted-ish colors, but still colorful. A big element, pivoting back to the propaganda posters of the game, is going to be talking about how our environments and the institutions around us inform the way we look at the world, and really trying to encourage some challenging of any narrative that one is fed, because you don't really know how true it is or what the ultimate agenda of those pushing said propaganda is. And we really want to create some world building with propaganda and then kind of subvert that propaganda later in the game. And that's going to be a lot of fun to make art-wise. I would really like to get started on the art, despite that not normally being how I would go about doing it. And part of the reason is devlogs being a part of my development process this time. I'm going to want to get the game a bit more presentable, a bit quicker. But that will also make it a lot easier to visualize what the final product will be like. So I think that maybe this new approach, where it's a bit more balanced as opposed to mechanics first, then art and music and everything else, is going to be a very interesting take on what I normally do, and maybe it'll produce a better product. Who knows? So, you made it to the end of the first devlog. I know there's not a whole ton going on right now, but I really wanted to get to share what I'm working on, as well as give a insight to the very early development of this game, because something I really enjoy as someone who has made games myself is watching games in the stage that most of the public doesn't see them in. So if this isn't for you, then it was for me. I'll look back on it someday and I'll smile. But I really do hope that you enjoyed it. If you want to follow along, feel free to subscribe. Hit the like button. The bell, I think, is important. And yeah, you should do that because this is going to be really cool. Or if you don't like it, you can not. See if I care.